The Skeptic Zone, a miracle of technology. A universe of reason, the Skeptic Zone.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone for the 22nd of January 2010. Episode number 66. Richard Saunders here with you once again. Episode 66, on the 22nd of January, 6622. Okay, all you numerologists out there, get working. And speaking of numerologists, you have to be a bit of a numerologist to work out the fantastic numbers involved with the ludicrous, bogus and quack modality known as homeopathy. And a bit of a win for our side this week, where two websites run by Homeopathy Plus in this country have been ordered to remove misleading and unverified information from their websites about homeopathic vaccination. Now, this order has been made by the Therapeutics Goods Administration, the TGA here in this country. The retraction that the Homeopathy Plus are required to put on their website reads as follows. Retraction. An advertisement for homeopathic immunization products, which we published on this website, should not have been published. In the advertisement, we unlawfully made the claims that homeopathic immunization products could aid immunity, were alternatives to vaccination, and that they could prevent or protect against infectious diseases, including serious infectious diseases. We also made claims that an advertised homeopathic product was more effective than antiviral medication. A complaint about the advertisement was recently upheld by the Complaints Resolution Panel. We did not provide adequate evidence to support the claims made in the advertisement, and the panel found that the claims were unlawful, misleading, and unverified, and breached the Therapeutics Goods Advertising Code. The panel therefore requests that Homeopathy Plus publish this retraction. So there you go. A bit of a win for our side this week in Australia. And more news about that can be found at www.skeptics.com.au or at Dr. H's very own blog, The Skeptic's Book of Poo-Poo, at skepticsbook.com. But now on to this week's show. This week's show, we've got a sort of a double-barrel Kylie Sturgess interview special. She starts off by interviewing Michael Marshall from the Merseyside Skeptics there in the UK, and he's going to be talking about many things, including the upcoming 1023 homeopathy campaign. Then Kylie interviews famous Australian blogger Sean the Blogonaut. After all that, we can relax in the nice hot tub with me, Brian Dunning, and a bunch of skeptics in a special Californian edition of The Think Tank. So sit back, grab that champagne, and enjoy this week's Skeptic Zone.
I'm Kylie Sturgess, and I'm talking to Michael Marshall. Michael Marshall, best known as Marsh amongst the Merseyside Skeptics, is a presenter of the Righteous Indignation podcast and Skeptics with a K. The 1023 campaign, found at 1023.org.uk, is challenging homeopathy and hopefully will manage to do it worldwide. The 1023 campaign aims to raise awareness about the realities of homeopathy, not only investigating the claims, but why people should care. As a member of the Merseyside Skeptic Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism, Marsh talks to us for the Skeptic Zone. Okay, Marsh, I guess my first question is there anything that you don't do for skepticism?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, I help run the Merseyside Skeptic Society, which runs Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub. So I try as best I can and keep regular speakers coming along there. We've only been doing talks since, I think, October, although we've existed since February. So we had a bit of a kind of a run-up, basically. We just thought we'd try and gauge how much interest and opinion there would be in Merseyside before we started. And it turns out there was quite a lot. So we went with it. So, yeah, so I organised the Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub. I'm on the Skeptics with a K podcast. I present that with Mike and with Colin from the MSS, from Merseyside Skeptics, which listeners to the Skeptic Zone might have actually heard, that's our really unprofessional sounding trailer in the middle of the Skeptic Zone every now and again, where we kind of just mumble and things. That would be us.
It's
I also
a lovely ad. You shouldn't be so tough on yourself. It's great to be able to support other podcasts. It's great.
Yeah, well, it was really fantastic for the Skeptic Zone to run it. I also present the Righteous Indignation podcast as well, which is a weekly show, which is a bit more sort of formalised and structured. And other than that, I'm co-running the 1023 campaign, which is the big campaign that's happening in the UK and hopefully around the rest of the globe at the moment to bring homeopathy to light.
In order for our audience to get a bit of context, what exactly is Boots and why are they in particular being challenged by the first leg of the 1023 campaign?
Boots are the leading pharmacy in the UK. They're huge. They're on every high street, and they're synonymous with healthcare, really. So they've got an incredibly professional reputation, an incredibly legitimate reputation. They're where people turn first and foremost for their pharmaceuticals, which is why it's incredibly disappointing that they sell their own brand of homeopathy as well as a leading brand of homeopathy right there in the shop next to the real medicines.
I was wondering if, like in Australia, there's several different pharmacies or drug stores that could possibly be targeted in this campaign.
Well, there are, but none with the legitimacy that a pharmacy with the reputation of Boots can lend it. There are other shops in the UK, things like Holland and Barrett's and health food shops that sell homeopathy, but they don't sell prescription medicines and cough medicines and flu remedies that are genuine medicine. In Boots, it's very, very difficult to distinguish between the real medicines and the alternative medicines. There's just a little side stall, a shelf with the words alternative medicines and all the homeopathy and herbal stuff right on there, and there's nothing to say that this stuff isn't proven.
If I'm not mistaken, there's quite a history of political and popular support for homeopathy in the UK, isn't there?
Yeah, it's I'd say it's more pervasive than a lot of people would realise. I don't think it's necessarily something that your average man on the street has tried, but it's the industry's worth around about £40 million, I believe. Plus, the NHS actually supports homeopathy. It spends around about £4 million a year on 4 homeopathic hospitals, one of which is actually situated in Liverpool, which is where I live, which is why it's a particular bugbear of ours.
Wow, that's also, your home turf. Yeah, I can imagine why it would be quite insulting to have that appear right on your doorstep.
It's absolutely crazy that the government health service, the National Health Service, actually supports this stuff, even though it's been proven. And whenever they're asked about it, they tend to say, well, people want it, so we provide it, which is a bit of a cop-out when it comes to medicine, because you don't give people what they want, you give them what can be proven to work.
So what initially inspired the 1023 campaign?
That's a very good question, actually. It was something that came up while we were at one of our Skeptics in Pub socials up in Liverpool, and we saw that there were many bloggers doing some great work when it came to the Simon Singh case and the chiropractic, the General Chiropractic Council and the BCA. There were some great bloggers who were taking apart the claims of chiropractors and calling into task for some of the more outrageous statements they were making. And it occurred to us that was a really powerful way for your average sort of skeptic to get involved and to really lend a hand. But while everyone's attention was turned to chiropractic manipulation and chiropractors, there was a real possibility that other forms of pseudoscience and pseudomedicine might sort of flourish with the spotlight turned off them. So we thought, why not let other people take care of the chiropractors, and we'll try and put something together where a similar band of bloggers, anyone who wants to get involved, can gather together under the umbrella of one campaign and take a look at homeopathy.
I've noticed on social networking sites like Twitter that there's even an effort to get overseas people involved.
Absolutely. We're trying to encourage it to spread as wide as possible. Although the campaign itself is largely UK focused, we really want to support international bloggers and international skeptics. So it's a case of look around you, keep an eye out for claims made by homeopaths, visit your local homeopaths, visit pharmacies that sell homeopathic remedies, and try and get a good idea of the lie of the land locally. And then use the 1023 umbrella, the 1023 band to start taking apart the claims of homeopaths, to start drawing attention to them and subjecting them to criticism and analysis, and also to make people aware of what homeopathy is and fundamentally what it isn't, which is it isn't real medicine.
I've read in the news that the House of Commons parliamentary science watchdog about Boots' insistence on selling homeopathic preparations, their chief pharmacist, Professional Standards Director Paul Bennett, admitted that they had no evidence So doesn't this possibly contravene consumer rights or trade practices acts?
Well, that's certainly something we're looking into. What we're doing at the moment with the campaign, and I will stress that the 1023 campaign is more directed at homeopaths in general and homeopathy, the system of homeopathy in general. But at the moment, we've chosen to focus an arm of the campaign on Boots because, in part, of this admission by Paul Bennett that Boots sell homeopathy not because they can prove it works or because the evidence is there to support it, but just because it sells. And
no, it's absolutely not a good enough reason. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's really not a good enough reason at all, and it certainly doesn't stand to the policy of exceptional patient care, which the pharmacy proclaims. So I think absolutely that it's worth taking. We are taking a look at whether it is a remit there of trading standards and advertising standards and things like that. I know in the UK you have to make direct claims of efficacy and direct claims of what it can cure before you can be called to action or called to task. But that's something we're definitely looking into. But I think as much as anything, what we have on the site, which is an open letter appealing to Boots to reconsider the sale of homeopathy, I think that's the first step, because we don't want to go in all guns blazing and start laying down the law. It's a much, much better situation if Boots realise that selling something that they can't prove works and that has been proven not to work is bad patient care, and if they can take it off the shelves themselves, we will continue to support Boots and their excellent reputation. But until that happens, it's a bit of a big black mark on their conscience and on their reputation, I think.
When I first heard about the campaign, I was reminded of the Australian Skeptics' open letter to pharmacies.
Yes, I mean, we did actually, I'll admit, we lifted fairly wholesale from your letter, certainly about ear candling and
you'll be getting
AVN.
You'll be getting a letter from Richard Saunders now, oh dear.
Well, fortunately enough, once we put our letter to Boots out, I actually got an email from Iran and from Richard, who were supportive of our campaign and were quite happy for us to use the jumping button. Hang on, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, they were quite happy for us to use their letter.
Yeah.
The launching pad, that's the one. They were quite happy for us to use your letter as a launching pad for our letter, because I think ultimately what we as skeptics need to do in general is stop reinventing the wheel. And I think that was something that we were trying to do with the 1023 campaign. There were a lot of people who were individually taking homeopathy and the claims made apart. But they were doing it individually in the same kind of way as each other. Whereas now we've tried to sort of put a little system in place where you can say, right, this one's done, someone's done this part of it, so you can focus your attention elsewhere, and everyone doesn't have to be doing the same thing. The groundwork there is already done for them, and they can use it to go further, really.
So this is just the beginning of the 1023 campaign, and I'm certain that you've got a lot more on the cards. Can overseas people perhaps contribute more?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to check out what we've got on the site at the moment, we've got an explanation of what homeopathy is about. We've also got 10 reasons not to use homeopathy, which was something that we felt was a strong piece of content for the site, because a lot of people say, well, we can still use homeopathy. It works alongside real medicine. Well, it doesn't. And if you check out those 10 reasons, it's things like it's a waste of your money as a customer, but it's also a waste of everyone's money with the tax money going into it from the NHS, and also it's a waste of your time. You could be getting better care, and it's a waste of everyone's time because we could be researching something else. We could spend that time actually finding more cures, more medicines, more treatments that actually work. So on the site there's an essay on that, and there's also a way of getting involved. We've got videos up there, so there's plenty on there for people to pick up information on homeopathy and hopefully then spread it around people they know. So if next time someone's recommending homeopathy or contemplating trying it, people can be in a position to explain what it is and what it isn't. Well, it started already. If you go to the website 1023.org.uk, that's all in numbers, 1023.org.uk. There's a form there for people to get involved. So far, we've put our first piece of activism out there because we want to try and set people small actions that they can get involved in, and hopefully it will contribute to a larger movement. So the first piece of action is to sign the letter to Boots and appeal to them to stop selling something that doesn't work. Yeah, so that's the first piece of action. We've actually just launched the second piece of action, which involves a few little tasks for people to do, one of which is to sign a petition to the government to have the government regulatory body take a look at homeopathy and whether it should be funded by the NHS. So they can sign that petition if you're based in the UK. We also have up there a flyer which can be downloaded and given to homeopaths left in pharmacies that sell homeopathy, which explains what homeopathy is and what it isn't, and why it shouldn't be considered an alternative to real medicine. So you can download that flyer and distribute that. And we also are encouraging people to not stay quiet. So if they see a story in an online newspaper or on a blog, feel free to comment on that blog, to point them in the direction of our website, to explain to them the rules behind homeopathy, and to stop being as much as possible the armchair skeptic, and to sort of roll up their sleeves and try and help out.
Well, I'm very pleased to say that there's a few Australian sceptical groups out there who are hoping to test out the efficacy or inefficacy of homeopathy over the weekend. I think it's particularly wonderful that we've just started hearing about how websites like Homeopathy Plus and DNH.org have been ordered to remove information suggesting that they can provide homeopathic immunisation after there was a complaint made to the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
Absolutely, and I think the internet is proving more and more to be the most amazing tool for getting people involved. We see that time and time again with bloggers, and even with the advent of Twitter. I think this campaign is really taking off as much as anything on Twitter. If people want to check out on Twitter, search for the hash 1023. That's TEN23, because Twitter doesn't really like numbers too much. If you want to search for that hashtag on Twitter, you'll see there's a whole flurry of activity on a fairly constant basis of people putting up information about the site and about the campaign. It's 1023.org.uk, and that's 1023 in numbers.
Thanks again, Marsh, for being a part of our show.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And you can find more of his work on the Righteous Indignation podcast, the Skeptics with a K podcast, the Merseyside Skeptics, and of course, the 1023.org.uk site.
Astronomycast takes a facts-based journey through the cosmos as it offers listeners weekly discussions on astronomical topics ranging from planets to cosmology. Hosted by Fraser Kane of Universe Today and myself, Dr. Pamela Gay of Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, this show brings the questions of an avid astronomy lover directly to an astronomer. Together, Fraser and I explore what is known and being discovered about the universe around us. Join us each week as we take a facts-based journey through the cosmos at astronomycast.com.
I'm Kylie Sturgess, and I'm talking to Sean Wright. In 2009, Sean Wright won the Nexus Monty Miller Award. It is named after a prominent 19th century free-thought advocate, Monty Miller, and is presented annually to an Australian, New Zealand, or South Pacific atheist who has made an outstanding contribution to advancing the cause of free thought in this region. It may involve work in the fields of atheism, skepticism, humanism, rationalism, or in the case of 2009, all of these. Thanks for joining us on the Skeptic Zone, Sean. Now, people might recognise your name as the author of a rather spiffy-looking steampunk-themed blog. In the press release from the Atheist Nexus for the Monty Miller Award, you're described as an advocate for those survivors of the Mercy Ministries Church, and also an investigator of the activities of Hillsong Church, and committed to challenging the claims of Merrill Dory's Australian Vaccination Network. So how would you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? I always find that sort of question a bit difficult. It's like answering an interview question when they ask you to tell us about yourself. Tell us why you think you're good enough for the position or whatever. So, I suppose it's a bit difficult. But on my blog, I have myself down as an atheist, a skeptic, and a humanist. So I guess that is how I describe myself. I think it necessary to be upfront and open about my atheism. I'd like to see that change in the long term, perhaps 20, 30 years down the track, where you don't have to be so upfront about that part of your life, what you believe in. But I think at this point in time, it's necessary to be upfront. To say, as an atheist, here I am. I'm a good person. I'm a community-minded person. I'm a deep thinker. And none of that is down to an omniscient, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-doing God. So that's why I think it's important to be open and upfront as an atheist. As a skeptic, I think I see skepticism as tied in with my atheism. I like to think the decisions I make in life are based on thinking deeply about a situation, examining all the claims. So and being aware of the things about our humanity, cognitive biases, that sort of thing, the way perception can be altered by our emotional state at the time, that sort of thing. Being aware that those things are out there and affect our views on the world, and so I think I'd define myself as a big S skeptic as opposed to a little S skeptic. I think I've always been skeptical about most things. I think a good, decent education in Australia sort of does give you a reasonable scepticism. And then as a humanist, I'm not a card-carrying member of any humanist organisation, but I suppose that's the opposite to my atheism. My atheism is what I don't believe in, whereas the humanist side of me is, these are the aspirations, the principles that I try to live by. So in a general sense, I'd say I'm humanist. I believe in being active in the community, and that's active for everyone, not just skeptics or atheists. I believe in doing the least harm in all situations, or do no harm. But sometimes we don't have that choice. But
some of the topics you've investigated in your writings include Hillsong Church and their activities in Australia. Can you tell us how you came to be interested?
I suppose I've been writing about them over the last 2 years. I think it probably comes down to a number of different circumstances led me to write about Hillsong. One that sticks out in my mind is, of course, reading Tony Levin's book, People in Glass Houses. That gave me a sort of a broader background on the church. I've always been somewhat wary of evangelical churches, and that stems from sort of earlier experiences in my formative years, I guess you'd say. When I was still a practicing Christian, I was invited along by a couple of friends to an Assemblies of God church. The Assemblies of God were a precursor to the group of churches of which Hillsong is a more prominent member. But I was invited along to this Assemblies of God church. Didn't mind the rock band, the rock style music. Probably found the lyrics a bit naff and a bit out of place, I guess you could say. But that side of it, the jubilant nature of the service, I suppose, was interesting and refreshing. What scared me in the sense that, not that I was actually in fear of the Holy Spirit or some sort of spirit possessing people, but it was witnessing adults and in some cases people that I knew waving their hands in the air and then talking in tongues. That it scared me because here were intelligent adults, some of whom I had respect for, behaving in a way that I thought was extremely weird. I suppose I've always had a certain degree of scepticism, and that demonstration just felt, I suppose, dishonest to me. So I've had this wariness of the evangelical approach to things. And then, of course, my two friends that invited me along to that service then went on to join another church, even more evangelical, even more extreme than Hillsong, called the Potter's House, and they're still active in my hometown, and I've had sort of run-ins with their pastor on the street, and uses pretty underhanded preaching techniques, emotional steamrolling, that sort of thing. So even as a Christian, then continuing when I became an atheist, I've had a awareness surrounding evangelical style churches. And then, of course, watching the media and following Hillsong, there's been a number of things that put them in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. And I suppose supporters of the church like to claim that they're persecuted, but I think there's criticism warranted, definitely. You go back even into the early church history, you've got Frank Houston, Brian Houston's father's admitted to sexually molesting a young boy, yet despite the law currently, and I think the law at the time, nothing was ever reported to police. He never faced any charges. He was just put to the side, swept away, and not dealt with. Aside from that, you've got scandals surrounding the misappropriation of funds for Indigenous program. You've got infiltration into schools through the Shine program and through EXO days. I think there is definite criticism warranted of them. They put themselves out there as Christians, as people filled with the Holy Spirit and there for the Lord. And I think if you put yourself up on a pedestal, you'd be prepared to take some knocks when you're doing the wrong thing.
Recently, it seems Australia's somewhat secular identity is being challenged on a variety of fronts. What do you think are some of the big concerns Australia should have about the intersection of religion and politics?
Well, I don't have any issues with anyone of any religion, faith or non-faith going into politics, attempting to stand as a member. I guess where I start to get concerned is where, instead of a person's faith or belief informing their actions, I get concerned when it seems those beliefs, that faith, seems to dictate actions. And the most recent example I can think of that is Tony Abbott and his call for the Bible to be studied in school. Another area of concern, and this has happened probably, as far as I can see, for the last decade in Australia, it's where deference or special sort of significance is given to certain religious groups above others. Most recently, the Australian Christian Lobby and Senator Conroy's talking with them over his release of the filtering report as to why they get special significance or special treatment on this issue, rather than just issuing a standard sort of release of the report to all interested stakeholders. Another big example that is concerning to me is both Rudd and before him Howard's addressing of sort of evangelical church leaders in Australia, helped there by Hillsong, and also previously Howard's special treatment of the exclusive brethren. So they're my sort of main areas of concern, where politics is sort of walking too tightly hand in hand with religion. Other areas of concern, of course, when you get people like Cardinal Pell attempting to influence Catholic members of Parliament to vote in a particular way, by perhaps threatening or insinuating that he might withdraw certain religious privileges or acts from them if they go ahead and vote a certain way. Immediately springs to mind that's new. I mean, there's always been an issue, as far as I can see, with chaplains in schools. There's actually no really good evidence or credible evidence that there's any benefit to having chaplains in state schools. And then, of course, the whole idea of having religious scripture classes in state schools is a concern, but they've been around for a relatively long period of time. Certainly wouldn't tar all religious believers with the same brush, but certain religious people that don't understand the value of having a secular, and by secular I don't mean atheist, but a secular playing field, for lack of a better word.
You've done a little investigation into how to raise the profile of a blog. Do you have any advice for people who are hoping to make a difference via online networking or blogging?
Yeah, quite recently I've been attempting to raise the profile of my blog. I've been using a workbook put out by an Australian gentleman, Darren Rouse, Christian and pro blogger. The guy makes an astounding amount of money through blogging, one of the top bloggers in the world. But his workbook, to me, is a good sort of series of exercises and activities that basically get you into good habits for blogging. And I think probably in the science, the skeptic and the atheist community, we're all reasonably capable, and some of us more so than others, of writing well and writing good, engaging content. I'm not sure how many of us actively seek to promote our blogs, perhaps in the same way that commercial bloggers do. And I think perhaps the message. What we're trying to get across might suffer in some respects. I mean, somebody like PZ Myers certainly isn't going to have any trouble. But there are other equally good writers out there that probably don't get the level of coverage that he would, and their material is just as worthwhile, if not better in some cases. So in that sense, yes, I've been using Darren Rouse's, I'm just trying to think of it off the top of my head, I think it's 31 Days to Building a Better Blog. And it's not rocket science, it's just a series of activities or habits or techniques that you can use. Yeah, so, but I mean, essentially, my investigations are ongoing. I had some real success in the first couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago I had a post that went absolutely ballistic. Tried the same technique a couple of days ago, and nowhere near the same sort of result. So it's something that I think requires, aside from just implementing certain techniques or certain habits, you really need to look at your stats, look at your blog, look at who's looking at you basically, and try and figure out some patterns of your own. And be persistent and consistent. I'm just thinking back to my Mercy Ministries coverage, which didn't really benefit from from blog promotion or anything like that, but I think benefited from persistence and being consistent in the writing. That took probably verging on coming up to 2 years of writing about the issue, and it's just chipping away, writing every day, and writing engaging, relevant information. So at the moment, Twitter and submission to Reddit are probably my best sources for views. In 6 months' time, that should change, and I think always keeping a weather eye out for technological changes is a good idea.
Finally, congratulations again on winning the 2009 Monty Miller Free Thought Advocacy Award. What are some of the goals you have for 2010?
Yeah, thanks. That was quite a shock. As to my goals for 2010, to write better, perhaps to delay my posting. One of the terrible things about blogging technology for myself as a passionate writer is that I'll write something down and read through it once or twice, think everything's edited perfectly, and then publish it, and then only to realise I've made an absolutely simple, glaring mistake. So I think perhaps, write better and relax a bit, not be so eager to publish so quickly. I'd like to increase that readership, but also maintain my perspective. A gentleman over at Bruce, over at the Thinkers Podium on WordPress, mentioned that he thought I had a rather unique take on things, and that that was one of the things that he really appreciated about my blog. And I think that's important. That in particular for me, if I'm chasing more readership, I don't want to lose what essentially makes my writing different, just for the sake of having more people see what I write. Two big things I'd like to do this year, if possible, and one is attend the Global Atheist Convention in Melbourne, on which I've got the tickets for, plane tickets and convention tickets. I'd like to do that just for networking, social reasons, but I'd also like something big to come out of it, something important to come out of this meeting of atheists from around the world and around Australia. I'm also hoping to do something with the group of Australian and New Zealand atheist bloggers, perhaps some coverage of the event or some reporting on it. Haven't quite made up my mind, still waiting for the program details to be sorted out there, and see what we might be able to do as a group of atheist bloggers. In the long term, I'd love to get paid for doing some sort of writing work. I'm hoping that this will be a big year for atheists, and actually for skeptics in Australia with TAM later in the year. I'd love to be able to make it to TAM. It could really kick off two areas that I'm passionate about, that being atheism and skepticism.
Thanks again, Sean, for joining us.
Well, thanks, Kylie. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck to yourself and the Skeptic Zone and Skeptic Zone listeners for 2010.
To learn more about Sean's ongoing adventures, head to seantheblogonaut.com.
This is Eugenie Scott, National Center for Science Education. You can find us at www.ncsc.com. Come see us if you want to know anything about the creationism and evolution conflict in the United States, or more's the pity internationally these days. We are a clearinghouse for information on this vexing but certainly very interesting problem. Come and find out more about it.
Join us now for drinking skeptically in the think tank.
Yeah.
Calm kangaroo.
Add kangaroos. Most things are better. Cheers.
Cheers to
kangaroos.
Everybody. Cheers.
2 kangaroos. 2 marsupials.
Lisa, do you want yours? It's sitting right there.
I'm okay. I've had plenty.
And welcome to the Think Tub.
Think Tub.
Think Tub. I'm with Brian Dunning.
Hello.
Hello, Brian. Could you introduce everybody for us?
Oh, boy. We've got Gus and Sarah and Lizzie and Lisa.
Hi. Hi.
Hey.
What's up?
Do you want full introductions? Is everyone embarrassed to use their full name, or...?
I'm not that embarrassed, no.
Now, this must be one of the more enjoyable think tank I've done. We're calling it the Think Tub because we're all sitting in Brian's hot tub with the microphone hanging over on a piece of string.
It's very classy.
It's a pretty good rig, I gotta say.
It is.
I'm not at all worried about the fate of the microphone.
This is, in fact, the famous Skeptoid hot tub.
It is.
That's awesome.
Famous or infamous?
Depends who you ask.
And it's where many well-designed experiments have been performed.
You realize there are some people who are downloading this podcast for the first time.
Those poor sods.
Yeah, what I always try to stress in the show is that skeptics like to have fun like anybody else. Parties and
our fun is less guilt-ridden.
That's true. We don't have to say Hail Marys afterwards.
Tomorrow morning we do not have to go to confession.
Oh yes, and we are sipping champagne.
Woo.
I should have mentioned that.
Classy, yeah.
Cheers.
And everyone's naked.
Except for that part.
That part does require confession? Or what?
This is theatre of the imagination, you know. So and listeners now are imagining us in this hot tub sipping champagne naked. Yes, the champagne is naked. I'm here to say.
This naked is the champagne is scantily clad.
Well, I had such a great time tonight in the pub. I hope everybody did. It was a nice turnout, right?
It was a fabulous turnout. It was probably it was certainly the busiest pub night in the Skeptics in the OC that we've ever had.
Did you have people from 40, 50 miles away?
Oh, at least. Or farther. How far did you come?
Oh, a long way.
I think just to everyone's got this these incredible images floating around in their head right now. It's worth pointing out that those of us sitting in the hot tub have caused huge volumes of water to spill out over the edge because we're very unsightly people in general.
Speak for yourself, man.
There goes some more water as we speak.
I think I did that actually.
Can you give our listeners any inside gossip in the sneak peeks as to your projects coming up?
My project's coming out. Well, when is this coming out? Because it might be old news by then.
Oh, probably late January, something like that.
Well, probably about the same time then is I'm going to be doing a full first season of In Fact, my new video podcast. I put out 3 pilot episodes, late mid-2009, and I'm going to be doing a full season of 13 episodes starting in January. And they're about 3 minutes long, and probably by the time you hear this, they should be available at infactvideo.com.
Infactvideo.com?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Which a domain name for which, by the way, I was searching. Infact.tv and everything else was long been taken. But,
oh, wow.
So I was searching for infactvideo.com, and it was taken, too, and so I was quite upset by that, and I went to GoDaddy to do one of those domain purchase things, where you can, like, bid on it. And found out that the current owner was already myself.
Did you have to call him up and threaten him?
I did. I had to beat my own ass. I dragged myself out into the yard.
Were you sleep coding or something?
I don't know. I think I probably registered it 2 years ago or something and had forgotten all about it.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. That's because I really enjoyed the first 3 you produced.
And hopefully these will be less sickening to those who did not enjoy the moving background in the first 3.
Ah, the moving background. I was just thinking about that, yes.
I liked the background.
I didn't mind it. You had complaints about that?
I had quite a lot of complaints about that. I had mostly complaints from viewers. I had a lot of directorial feedback, too, from like guys who were actual movie directors and people who knew what they were doing, and none of them had any issues with the moving background.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't racing.
No, it wasn't racing, but it was
nicely.
Yeah, it was moving sickeningly, one might say. The same type of people who can't play the first-person shoot-'em-up games had the similar problems with my scrolling background. So that's gone, and some other things have been changed.
And what topics can we look forward to hearing about or seeing about?
Well, they're all based on old Skeptoid episodes, previous Skeptoid episodes that were some of the more popular and universally appealing ones. So it's not going for the same audience as my podcast. It's going for a new audience. Basically, more water spilling out of the tub.
It's cool.
You know, there's a lot more people who watch videos. YouTube, for example, has an incredibly huge audience by itself. And you've got the potential to reach a lot more people.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm doing it. It's not that I'm trying to bring something extra to Skeptoid listeners or something like that. It's just trying to go for a new audience, a new, broader audience.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing those because I've seen your production studio, and that's impressive.
It certainly is. He's winking as he's saying that, folks.
You guys listen to Brian?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When coerced.
When coerced.
Yeah.
More importantly, do you listen to Richard?
Yes.
I listened to Richard.
Absolutely.
As of 3 o'clock this afternoon.
That was a smattering of yeses.
Yes, I think it was evidenced by people singing his intro tune at the pub tonight.
Yeah, definitely best intro ever in the podcast world.
Can we hear a round of that now, please, from some of you?
That was people who were not coming to the tub.
Oh.
In the car park, I heard a rendition of the Skeptic Zone theme.
I thought I heard that too, but maybe I was mistaken.
That was us singing it, that's why. Now, you 3 people over here who I'm meeting for the first time, what's your interest in what we do, the skeptical line?
I think I knew I was a skeptic before I had a word for it, in that I understood that I didn't really believe in the supernatural, per se.
Yeah.
But no one I ever articulated that to really understood that, and they were like, so you don't believe in ghosts? And I was like, well, yeah, I guess I don't believe in ghosts. And they said, so you don't believe in, like, crystal healing either? And I said, no, I guess I don't. And then after a while, until I, by the time I was like 25 or 26, I finally figured out that what I believe in, if you want to use that word, is what I can basically say that I have solid evidence for, or that someone can give me solid evidence for.
Right.
So, and then somehow, I guess I just sort of ran across Skeptoid randomly.
Ah.
And I was like, these people understand they think the way I think.
Yeah.
And
yes.
In a way, it doesn't matter what conclusions they draw. It just matters that they use the same sort of processes to get there. And I'm not a scientist. I have no science background. I'm an artist. But what was important to me was that they sort of really try and think about what people tell them and try and sort of crank up their bullshit detector in terms of like, okay, that sounds interesting, but why don't we try and prove it? Or what you tell me sounds great, but let's see if there's any evidence for it.
And do you find...
So I didn't have the word skeptic for it until probably like 2 years ago.
Do you find the topics really interesting? I do.
Yeah, pretty much any topic. I mean, my real sort of... My passion is art, but when I think about science, what really like fills me with a kind of religious, and I use that in quotation marks, religious awe is astronomy. So anytime I learn anything about astronomy, that fills me with a kind of like, existential dread / feeling of amazement. And I think dread and amazement kind of go hand in hand.
I think that Carl Sagan called it numinous.
Yeah, the numinous. Absolutely. Yeah. And reading Contact when I was in high school, that was absolutely groundbreaking.
You've seen Cosmos, the series?
Yes. And I read Cosmos probably last year. I finally read the book. And I was accused of being a dork, which is absolutely true. And
long live the nerds, man.
Amen, brother.
Oh man, they call me anything they like. If I watch Cosmos, I don't care what they
it does. Yeah, exactly. I forget what my point was, but it really doesn't matter. Someone handed me champagne a while ago. So
but it's interesting you should mention that, because if I just look up into the sky right now over my shoulder here, I can see Orion, the constellation of Orion, upside down.
Right, for you it would be reversed, wouldn't
Which
it?
is pretty weird.
Yeah.
There it is, upside down.
It is summer right now in Australia.
Yeah. And I think I can see Mars just up a little bit. I can confirm that later on with my handy iPhone app.
Cassiopeia is over there.
Oh, yeah?
The W?
I think the reason they appear upside down is that Nibiru must have passed close to the Earth and rotated it 90 degrees.
Isn't he a little early? Or no, late. He's late, isn't he?
2003, wasn't it, the original?
Oh, boy. No, it's a starry night, and I can see the constellations I know, but they're upside down, so that's really interesting. Oh, there's the Pleiades over there. See that one?
Do you know that the term Subaru is the Japanese for Pleiades?
Pleiades, yes, yeah.
Which
no kidding.
I drove a Subaru. For
if you look,
the
that
first time,
explains
for,
their
for
logo. Yeah.
The first 6 years I could drive, I drove a Subaru, and I finally learned what the Pleiades were, and that it was the logo, and it was really very exciting to a young blossoming dork. Oh no!
That was Brian.
Yep.
Were those?
Pretty much any disaster that happens is my fault.
Uh-oh.
So all us being barefoot.
Oh, glass and bare feet. What could go wrong?
Nothing. You've seen people walking over glass before, haven't you?
I thought it was hot coals.
Yeah, you can walk over glass, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Hot glass coals of glass. And
We'll find out.
We'll be right behind you.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. Now, what about you?
I think what started me into the idea of critical thinking particularly was I worked as a research assistant on people working on an idea of invisible or unidentified skin parasites, which kind of brought to the surface people who had kind of some people did have skin parasites, some individuals had a persistent, unshakable belief that insects were inside their skin, to the contrary to persistent evidence to the otherwise. And it was, you know, and like experiencing their suffering, you know, and I didn't really have words for understanding that concept of critical thinking and how people perceive and come to what is true for them. And so that was very, very interesting and very exciting and confusing, and learning about skepticism and its thought about how people attain knowledge was very important for my work therein. And now that I'm working on my doctorate in clinical psychology, it's, I think, very relevant for me to understand how people, the individuals I work with, come to their reality and their truths. And it's helpful as a cognitive behavioral therapist to find dissonance with people's beliefs and how they come to believe what they believe. So it's very helpful for therapy to be skeptical, in my experience.
This is a very interesting you should raise these sort of topics, because we've been discussing this today, Brian. The way people convince themselves into believing things.
Yeah.
And I was discussing the feedback they get, the positive feedback with the kinesiology, for example. But I've seen this with all sorts of people, from astrologers to psychics to all sorts of people.
Well, as a reformed hypochondriac, I can say that what's amazing is that you can think critically about almost any other topic besides what you yourself have convinced to be true. I mean, I was an atheist by the time I was around 13, so I didn't think of God, but I was convinced at age 19 that I had a brain tumor and that I was dying. And any headache or symptom was the tumor. And by the time I was around 22, I realized, like, okay, no, I'm probably not dying of a brain tumor. But it's amazing that it took me 3 years to figure out that the symptoms that I thought were true were actually false. And the things that I thought were, you know, just, I mean, it was literally the idea of, like, you know, the false positives and remembering what...
Confirmation bias.
Exactly, confirmation bias. Remembering what was true and what was versus what was false.
Yeah.
And realize, and it was, you know, what I learned later was really a symptom of like, a poor body image. Like, I figured that my body, there was something wrong with my body, not the way it looked, but the way it was, you know, health-wise. And I was willing to think critically about God, about Jesus, about religion, about crystal healing, about anything you'd give me except for my own body. And I was convinced that something was wrong with my own body, and it actually turned out not to be. So it's amazing how individual people can be skeptical about almost anything except their own personal sort of, you
Secret
know,
cow.
Exactly. Their own sacred cows, even if it's a negative thing, even if it's something they think is harming them.
Now, it's a really good point, because I often wonder if I'm the same.
In what way?
That I have something that I have a block about.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't I be? I'm human like everybody else. And it's up for other people to tell me what it is, and then for me to go, oh, no, that's silly.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think part of it, I mean, I as I said, I was a skeptic even before I had the word for it. So I had read about people dismissing their own symptoms and then having it turn out to be real. So all I could think was like, and then the same thing happens to me. Like, I don't like to fly, but I do it on a regular basis because my family lives 3,000 miles away. So I go at least twice a year to go visit them. And I always think if I'm missing a flight or I'm trying desperately to catch that last flight out to the East Coast, like, oh my God, am I desperately trying to catch the death flight? Or am I desperately convincing myself that I'm healthy when in fact I am really sick? And I mean, you know, the human brain, I love it. I think it's one of the most fascinating objects ever created. At the same time, it totally screws me up on a regular basis. It's, you know, I think myself out of trying new things sometimes, and then I think myself into trying crazy things, and what I have to work on convincing myself, and I think most humans have to work on convincing themselves, is that your brain will lead you astray. And sometimes, if you try and research how it works, you can override those systems.
But I think that goes to show how your mind is, or your brain is like a meaning-making machine.
Yes,
and how you're trying to make meaning out of all these things and how it serves you so
Pattern seeking.
Which makes the process of skepticism
really difficult, especially in self-reflection.
Yeah. Well, the discipline of it, I think, is what it makes the discipline so important.
Yeah.
Well, you can't pick it up overnight.
No. It's. I think it's a lifelong process, honestly.
There's a lot to learn.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I learned all about it on Wikipedia. No, I'm kidding.
Well, but yeah,
I learned all about it on Brian's show.
Oh, yeah.
And
so you mean the Skeptic Zone?
Crikey,
mate!
Crikey.
Here's a crocodile. It's about to kill me.
As I was telling you, Richard, earlier today, most of probably the whole first 2 years of Skeptoid I would gladly throw away because I would do them all what I think is a lot better now. And I'm sure that 2 years from now I'll be saying the same thing about the shows I'm doing today.
Possibly. Don't be surprised if there's a lot of stuff that you think you'd look back on and say, no, that's good. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, some of it. But I mean, I when I go back and you know, read the transcripts or listen to the old ones, I know that, you know, I was guilty of a lot of the same things that I'm trying to do something about now.
Well, you're learning.
Well, that's true of almost anything you pursue. I mean, I as an artist, which a term I kind of get grossed out by, but reluctantly it has been applied to me, so I'll own it.
She draws Lockheed P-38.
Yeah, shut up about the P-38, my God. So like 2 years ago, the stuff I was drawing was absolute crap. And, you know, but I thought it was great at the time. And the stuff I think is great now, I'll probably think is crap in 2 years. But that's, I mean, what's the gift about the human brain, which is why, you know, I think I'll hang on to mine, is that...
And not have a tumor after all?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It turns out I'm pretty healthy. Is that it's able to learn from itself, in that we think, and there's conclusions we drew...
It's capable. It's capable. It doesn't always happen.
Well, there's conclusions I drew when I was 12 and when I was 15 and when I was 18 and when I was 25 that sound ridiculous to me now. And at age 28, you know, I'm drawing conclusions that will probably seem ridiculous at 35.
Possibly.
But I'm always able to look back at those conclusions and see what was correct about them and what was wrong about them. Well, and I think most skeptics and most people who work really hard at thinking about that would agree with me.
Well, and I think that what we've all been talking about is that our brain is able to change and to shift and to grow. I'm an artist too, and I look back on my quilt making, and there's stuff that I do not like the way I did. But at the time, it was good. And so same thing, you know, I grew up, my dad is a physicist, I questions a lot, and I have grown since then. And so I think that what we're saying is all the same thing. We're growing and changing constantly, and we always look back and say, I could have, would have, should have, but now I'm going to.
Which is so interesting, because as someone who's seen your quilts and as someone who's seen your art, at least on Facebook, I'm like, oh, wow, that's really great. And, you know, and I'd probably 2 years from now would think, that's really great.
But I would see, but I would see you interacting with a crazy person as a clinical psychologist, and I'd be like, how the hell does she do that?
Now,
And what do you think I'm doing right now, Lizzie?
There is that.
No, we don't use the term crazy person anymore.
I'm sorry, what do we use?
Yeah.
Like wacko
Yobbo.
or...
Yobbo.
Wait, what is that? Is that an Australian word?
Yeah.
Yabo?
Means idiot.
Brian and I were having this discussion today, and our Australian listeners will appreciate this, but how many words we have in Australia which mean idiot?
That's
And they came up
any
with
language that has lots of
Yobbo,
words for idiot is good.
Drongo, bogan, mug. What were some of the other ones?
I don't know.
Do they all have their each
Galah.
sort
They're
of...
all subtly
They're
different.
slightly
Yeah,
different
they're
connotations.
shades
That
of
is
idiot.
brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, they sound much cuter.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you use the word Yankee in your podcast announcing this particular event. And what's funny to me is that from the East Coast, Northeast area, a Yankee is from the Northeast.
Yeah.
But to an Australian, a Yank
to an
is
Australian,
any
exactly.
American.
Yank
Yeah.
is any American.
You call someone from Georgia a Yankee, and you might want to leave the room.
You might get your ass kicked, is what might happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for clarification, no, psychology does not call people crazy.
Sorry, what, I'm an artist. What is the word?
I don't think you would even... I mean, just people have different...
Atypical?
No, not even that, because people have different issues.
Yeah.
Issues.
Right. So thinking you have a tumor when you're 19.
That's an issue, man.
That's an issue.
That is an issue.
It's cool.
Differently advantaged.
Differently whacked out.
What differently
whacked out? Okay.
I prefer whacked out.
Now, how did you come across all this?
Well, I grew up Catholic, and I still kind of consider myself ethnically Catholic.
Culturally Catholic?
Culturally Catholic, yeah, it's a better term.
I understand.
But I was also very much into science, and as I progressed through that field, I'm now in the process of getting my doctorate in molecular biology. The age of the Earth came into play.
Oh, yeah?
Wow. Evolution, and many things that were written down in that great book as truth just
Hitchhiker's
seemed
Guide to the Galaxy
wrong. Oh, no, that one. No, 42 is still true.
The other book.
I was worried.
The other book seemed patently at odds with
reality.
Many lines of evidence.
Yes.
And I think from there, I kind of dropped the Jehovah complex, and I just kind of wandered around for a while until...
in the desert?
For 40 years?
You really don't need to take this.
Did you come across some sort of
You really
shrubbery?
don't need to take this. Oh, no, I'll go with the shrubbery.
A shrubbery?
The singing bush?
Yes, the shrubbery. You must cut down the largest tree in the forest with a herring.
This is geek hot tub.
It is.
Amen.
That was like 4 movie references in 5 seconds.
And geeky movies.
All the better.
Yeah.
The only.
Someone was saying something. Whoever it was,
Yeah,
please
It
continue.
was Gus.
Yeah, that was Gus. That's me. And I think the first podcast I caught was The Skeptic's Guide.
Yep.
And
a lot of people come to us with the Skeptic's Guide.
yeah,
It's
and
really
that's
cool.
sort of I don't remember if it was you, Sarah.
graduate from
I
the
don't remember.
Skeptic's
They graduate. That's
Sorry,
really kind of
Steve.
what happened. That sort of opened my eyes to the quote community, and branched out from there.
Well, did you have the experience of knowing that you were a skeptic before you had a word for it, or knowing that you were an atheist before you had a word for it?
I knew I was a scientist.
See, but
And I never really put skeptic to it. I saw Michael Shermer talk, and when I was younger, I would see him talk and go and do as so many do, and sort of add cynic on top of the skeptic.
Yes.
And then I would hear him talk and go, "This guy is making sense," you know.
That's true. Actually, one of my early experiences with the Australian skeptics was I went to a public talk about UFOs, and the guy speaking just made so much clear sense.
And he didn't sound like a jerk. He didn't sound like cantankerous.
Right.
He was just
meanie or crazy.
So, Richard, I have a question for you that I've wanted to know. Is my understanding is that in Australia, there's a lot less sort of religious fundamentalism and a lot sort of less religious, belief, and more sort of what we in America would refer to as woo-woo, a lot of like crystal healing, etc. Whereas here we have a lot of religious fundamentalism, a lot of like hardcore Christians. who would denounce in the same breath
the crystal healing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to know what your take is on that.
We have pockets of the fundamentalists.
Okay.
And I guess a lot of countries suffer that problem.
Right. Fundamentalist Christians, you mean?
Yeah. Well, we got the cults too.
Yeah.
But everything's sort of toned down a bit. Yeah, mainstream religion is just part of the background, really.
It's interesting, because here it seems like mainstream religion is sort of like,
mainstream.
Mainstream, and it kind of like kicks itself back up periodically.
I find it interesting that this country has laws with the separation of church and state, but you've got these...
Well, that was another of my questions, is that separation of church and state doesn't exist in, say, the UK, and I don't know what the law is in Australia.
No.
And yet, it seems that the government there is less influenced by religion. Whereas here, we have, like, the family scary prayer breakfasts.
The family...
And that's sort of terrifying to me.
Just about any politician in Australia can get elected, and no one really gives a rat's about their religious...
So you think an atheist could get elected in Australia? Have?
We've had atheist prime minister.
I don't think that could happen.
It's not an issue.
Because here, there are, I'm gonna do a cardinal sin and quote some statistic without knowing where it came from, but that it would be harder for an atheist to get to get elected here than a Muslim.
Oh, absolutely, because a Muslim could still say, like, well, we all believe... I mean, what bothers me...
I'm not saying anything about Muslims. Say that.
I know.
It's just about disemfranchised populations
and what bothers me about
in the United States.
A lot of sort of liberal, and I count myself as a liberal or a leftist, religion in that sense is that some people try to quote, like, well, we all believe in one God. It's all one God. And it immediately, instantly negates those of us who don't believe in a God at all.
Yep.
And, on one level, I can agree with them, like, yes, we should take care of our fellow man, but just for a very different reason. And it's really distressing to hear, when people talk about all one God, immediately eliminating those of us who don't believe in any God at all.
But I think also in this conversation, we've eliminated people who are skeptics, who identify as skeptics, but still are religious.
That's true.
Because I don't think it's synonymous to say you're skeptical and atheist.
But
not always, no.
Just getting back to the topic of the electing of someone, I was just thinking about it. It rarely even comes up in interviews when they're talking to politicians, what their religious views are.
In Australia?
It's just not an issue. So can you fix the taxes? What happened about the roads? You go to church, oh, that's nice. Now, what about this issue?
What about the kangaroos?
Yeah, what are you going to do about the bloody kangaroos?
Well, here it's like, we have the whole big government, small government issue. We have conservatives who are worried about, quote, big government getting in the way of our businesses. And yet in the same breath they will say, we want, gay people not to be able to get married, and we want government to control who can marry who. And then there was the issue of, like, well, liberals want, a small government in some sense and a big government in other sense. But what happens, there's always this umbrella issue of, like, well, as long as he has some sort of faith, and it's always a he, I mean, honestly. As long as there's some sort of faith, as long as he trusts some sort of, deity, it's going to be okay. And
like Mr. Deity.
Exactly.
Which is such a funny show. And as a woman, I fully support his show about Eve.
Big shout out to Mr. Deity. We enjoy your show.
How you doing, sir?
Sir. Brian.
I call the deity, sir.
Brian, I think I'm going to have to come back in the not too distant future and do another Think Tub.
Think Tubs are
good.
Well worthwhile.
They got no bus announcements, but that's just,
Yeah. A couple of people here could put their clothes back on. That would really kind of...
Oh my gosh, my mother can never listen to
I mean, I find that my own thinking has been, somewhat, like, screwed up by the tub.
By the tub.
By the tub or by the champagne?
Is it the energy
of
the
I'm sorry.
tub?
It's probably the energy crystal, like, scary chi.
It is. And it's the Vegemite I made you eat earlier.
Vegemite, which is
it's
vile.
the Aussie Vegemite
Vile
that's screwing with my
Vegemite.
system.
It's yeast, not algae.
Whatever.
Says the molecular biologist.
Well, on that cultural note, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me and Brian and Lisa's hot tub tonight.
You're here.
Thank you.
Brian, I'll try to make my way back.
I hope so. Make this a monthly event.
Thank you, everybody.
What is this?
We don't have any glasses to clink, so
okay.
you broke them all.
Brian just broke them all.
I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Jason.
And I'm Andrew from the Nonsense Podcast.
Bringing you a skeptical overview of news, religion, and all forms of pseudoscience.
We're defending science and reason against the onslaught of medical and spiritual nonsense.
All week, we are busy researching and debunking pseudoscience. But on the 7th day, we listen to the Skeptic Zone.
Check us out at nonsenspodcast.libsyn.com or search for the Nonsense Podcast on iTunes.
Thanks for joining me for this week's Skeptic Zone. Don't forget to check out the new podcast by Kylie Sturgess, Token Skeptic, at tokenskeptic.org. And thanks to Kylie for putting together our recent Skeptic Zone survey, and thank you to everybody who wrote in and took part in the survey. Many interesting results for us to look through. I'm glad most of you seem to like the show. Lots of good comments, lots of good constructive criticism, which we take on board. And just one point, all the ads you hear on the Skeptic Zone are actually done as favours. There is no paid advertising on the Skeptic Zone. We advertise people we think you might like to hear about, just so you know. And of course, if you want to help the Skeptic Zone, you can contribute via donation or subscribe via www.skepticzone.tv. Well, enough of all that. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.
The Skeptic Zone.